Good morning, campers, and welcome to week 2. This week, we're back in our Godly Playroom to hear our story. This room might be familiar to a lot of you, and maybe you've never been in here before at all. But that's okay, because we're going to hear a story today about a family who left a place where they felt familiar and comfortable to go out on a journey to places far away and unknown, and they wondered if God would be with them on their journey. Our story today takes place in the desert, just like so many of the things that happen to the people of God. So it's important for us to have a piece of the desert right here in our Godly Playroom. It's not the whole desert, of course, but it's a piece of it. The desert is a dangerous place. The wind is blowing and constantly changing the landscape of the sand, and so it's easy to lose your way. There's very little water, and so it's hard for plants to grow there. And so it's hard to find food. And people can go hungry if they stay in the desert for too long. During the day, the sun is so hot that it burns your skin. But at night, it gets quite cold. When the wind blows, it can sting your skin. And so people wear special clothes when they go into the desert. The desert is a dangerous place, and no one goes there unless they have to. After the flood, people and creatures began to spread out in all 4 directions to fill the earth with life again. People and animals settled near rivers because they were a great source of water. People began to settle in villages. Some of those villages became towns, and some of those towns became great cities. And one of those cities is called Ur. The people in Ur believed that there was a God for everything, that there was a God for flowers, a God for trees, a God for animals, plants, the moon, the stars, many gods for everything. But there was one family who lived there who thought that all of God was in everything. Abram and Sarai were part of that family. And when it came time for them to move to a new city, they wondered if God would be there. So they began their journey, but they weren't alone. They took their animals with them and members of their family, old and young, and many helpers. During the day, they followed the great river Euphrates so they could have water for them and for their animals. And at night, they camped in tents along its banks. It was quite a long journey. But after some time, they began to meet people on the road who were coming from the city of Haran, and so they knew they were getting close. Sometimes at night, Abram would go out to the edge of the desert, and he would look up at all the stars in the sky and all the grains of sand in the desert. And Abram would come so close to God, and God would come so close to Abram that Abram knew what God wanted him to do. God wanted Abram and Sarai to leave this place and head west. And so they did. But this time, they didn't take quite as many members of their family. And there was no river to guide them or give them food or water. eventually, they came to a place called Shechem. And they climbed a hill and prayed to God. And God was there. And so Abram built an altar to mark that place. They thanked God for being with them on their journey, and they continued on. The next place they came to is called Bethel. And again, God was there. God wasn't just here or there, but all of God was everywhere. And so they built another altar to mark this place. And they continued on their journey. Finally, they came to a place called Hebron, near the Oaks of Mamre, and that's where they settled. Again, Abram came out to the edge of the desert and looked up at all the stars in the sky and all the grains of sand in the desert. And God came so close to Abram, and Abram came so close to God that Abram knew what God was telling him. And God said, I am going to make you the head of a great family, and Sarai will be the mother. That seemed so funny to Abram because he and Sarai were very old, much too old to have children. God's promise seemed impossible to him, but he listened to God anyway, and he changed his name to Abraham, which means father of many, and Sarai became Sarah. One day, 3 visitors came from the desert to their tent. Abraham was sitting outside and welcomed them in, where Sarah prepared 3 measures of flour, which was a lot. She gave them bread and meat to eat, and milk and water to drink, which was the custom. The visitors told Abraham and Sarah that they would become parents and lead a great family. And Sarah just had to laugh. She was much too old to have children. The visitors went on their way, and do you know what happened? Abraham and Sarah did have a child. And when he was born, they laughed again. And so they named him Isaac, which in their language meant laughter. When Isaac grew up, Sarah, who was now old and full of years, died. They buried her in a cave near the Oaks of Mamre. Abraham was very sad and he missed Sarah very much, but he knew that there was one more thing he needed to do. So he sent his most trusted helper back to the land of their people to find a wife for Isaac. When he was near Haran, a woman came out to greet him and to show him and his animals to a well where they could receive water. She also invited him to eat dinner with her family. She was as courageous as she was kind, because after the helper told her family all about Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and the great family, Rebecca decided that she wanted to be part of the great family too. And so she set off on the long journey to Hebron. And when she came close, Isaac came out to greet her. And then they were married. Now Abraham was old and full of years, and he died. And Isaac and Rebekah buried him next to Sarah in the cave near the oak trees. Isaac and Rebekah had children, and their children eventually had children, and those children had children, and those children had children, and this continued on until your grandparents were born, and your grandparents had your parents, and your parents had you. And now we are all part of the great family, which are as many as the stars in the sky and the grains of sand in the desert. I wonder which part of the story you liked best. I wonder which part is the most important. I wonder if there's any part that we could leave out and still have all we need. I wonder which part of this story is about you, or where you are in this story. Well, make sure that you tune in tomorrow because we're going to talk about altars. You probably are familiar with the altar that we have in church, but there are also all kinds of altars. Just like Abraham built altars in the desert to mark them as a place where he felt close to God. We're going to talk about that tomorrow, and you don't want to miss it. Have a great day, everybody, and we'll see you next time.